We can turn back time. We really can. And the model of the matrix that we're living in is all about the aging process, all about getting old, all about getting shriveled up. But first of all, I'd like to thank my most gracious hosts. Rhonda and Ian, I am so grateful for you and grateful for what this building represents in regards to the gathering place and how you are pillars of this community and really do so much for us and all the love that we feel in this building. This is a really special place. And thank you for allowing me to be here today and to host this. And this is something that's so true to my heart that I love it. I live and breathe and eat this. I mean, if you even knew what my day was, I'm just like, hey, chat, what about what happens with this and this and this? And he gives me all this information and it's really cool. Today, I'd like to take you on an inflammation journey. And that inflammation journey is to show you how inflammation plays such a pivotal role in our aging process so that you can unlock your longevity and your vitality, to live pain-free, to live free of suffering, and to live free of fear. Fear is one of the most important things. And when we can truly live without fear, then our life changes. So let's get into the driver's seat and let's get going. What would your dream car be? If you were thinking about what would be under this canopy, what would your dream car be? Close your eyes. Would it be a Maserati? Would it be a Lamborghini? Would it be a muscle car? Would it be an old Mustang, a new Mustang? What would it be if you were just close your eyes and really decide what's under that? Well, my dream car is that one. A yellow Corvette convertible. And if you imagine your dream car and what would it be like to drive down the highway with it, whether it's a convertible or whether you got your windows open, whatever that looks like, whatever that feels like, when we can close our eyes and truly feel that experience, feel that freedom within that. When we think about our bodies are our vessels. The body is our car. It is what takes us from place to place. However, many of us, when we wake up in the morning and there's a knock at the door within our bodies, we ignore it. If I had this dream car and I woke up in the morning and I decided to start it up and there was a kunk and there was a clag and there was a thing, I'd be like racing into the mechanic, my son-in-law, and I'd get him to look at it and fix it. But many of us, we wake up in the morning, we've got a headache, we've got a backache, we've got foggy eyes, we have a foggy brain, we limp through the day, we are constipated, we have all of these issues. And then we go and we ignore it, or we take a pill to band-aid the symptom. We wouldn't band-aid the symptom if we were driving a vehicle like that. We'd be like, hey, I need to take care of this baby because I've wished my whole life for this thing. And that's how I'm going to drive my vessel. If I was standing in the kitchen and all of a sudden the faucet started overflowing and I decided that I was going to start wiping up the floor before I turned off the faucet, what would happen? I'm not getting to the root cause, am I? So, the soul versus the spirit. Our vessel houses our soul and houses our spirit. Really, what is the difference? We hear these terms constantly. Oh, it's my soul's journey. It's my spirit's path. My spirit is flying. Or what is this? Well, really, when we wake up in the morning and when we are on this journey, it is the soul part of us is the essence of who we are. Who are we? Who are we in this moment? The soul holds emotions and consciousness. The soul is unique and personal. That's who we are. But many of us don't even know who we are because we haven't taken enough time to actually find out who we are. The thought is of us mortal in many beliefs. The spirit is your life force. It is the energy. It is that essence of where we came from. That spirit. It is the divine spark within. When we talk about free will, it's actually divine will. Divine will be done. Thy will be done. And that is where we need to go, is we need to go within and find out where that spark is and how it connects us to something greater. More universal and transcendent the spirit is. So the vessel, our car, is housing ourselves, and we are driving down this road. And what the idea is that when we're driving down the road, we want to, if we swerve over a little bit, we have little bumps, we have little nudges, we have little events that go on. As we smooth out the process, as we're driving down the road, we don't want to go into the ditch. When we go into the ditch is when we got to claw our way back out and decide how we're going to get back into our car and how we're going to drive down the road. And the ditch is what the body tells us as far as what's going on. When we wake up and we can't move our legs, or our feet go numb, or we have nerve pain, or our arm goes to sleep, the body's telling us a story. And we need to listen to it. It's whispering. It's saying, hello, hello, hello. And most of us are too busy just doing whatever it is that we need to do, not listening to our soul, not being conscious. Who is Sharon? I asked myself that many times. I don't know why the picture isn't on there, but there we are. Oh, hang on here. Okay. Who is Sharon? I'm a mother, and I'm a Grammy of two beautiful children, a 2.5-year-old and a 6-year-old. I'm an author. I'm a nutritional consultant. I'm a Regen RCT medical specialist. I'm a longevity coach. I'm an inflammation specialist, and I'm a health advocate. But the biggest health advocate that I am for is my own health. And that journey has taken decades for me to get to this place. Decades of studying, decades of my own personal journey. And it really started when I was 13. When I was 13 years old, I was raised in a family, the youngest of 8 children, 6 older brothers and 1 older sister. And we lived in a lot of chaos. It was absolute chaos because it was fight and flight, and it was more survival than more growing up. And Ian can attest to this because he grew up as the youngest of 8 kids. I was in Canada and he's in Australia or New Zealand. And really what it was that the night before my second oldest brother's wedding, when I was 13 years old, I was just going into grade 9. I had my one and only appendix attack. And that attack, I decided that, well, I didn't want to disturb this wedding because there was all these festivities going on. So I sat in the corner Friday night, sat in the corner Saturday, sat in the corner Sunday. And then Monday morning when I collapsed, then, the light bulbs went on. It's like, we better take this girl into the hospital. Into the hospital I go. And my appendix had ruptured and it was rotting in my stomach. And it was like I was hours away from blood poisoning. And that was such a pivotal point within my life, because what that did was, first of all, it made me become very conscious of what happens, because when you're in a situation like that, the doctors have to leave the incision open. Now remember, I'm 13 years old. I'm in a teaching hospital in Edmonton, University of Alberta Hospital. I'm 13 years old, really conscious. Yeah, I'm just a new teenager going into grade 9. And what they had to do is they had to leave the incision open because my entire stomach cavity had filled full of infection, and they had to flush me out like flushing out a toilet. So they would put a tube inside of me and they would take saline solution, and I would have to beg these nurses to warm it up before they flushed out my interior cavity to flush out all that infection. And then within a few days, they decided, they got the infection. They closed me up. Within 24 hours, my fever went to 105. My entire stomach filled full of infection. They had to open me up again and start the whole process. So 15 days. The gift that was given to me, though, at that time was I became enamored with the human body. So when I went in grade 10 and studied biology and chemistry and anatomy and physiology, it was like, okay, this is my path. And I am going to continue this path, and I'm really interested in the human body. But that pivotal point ended up taking me to another level, and I'll talk to you about it later. So really, have you ever heard of arthritis? Have you ever heard of fibromyalgia? Sciatica, diabetes, irritable bowel syndrome, heart disease. What do they have in common? Anybody can guess? Inflammation. It all starts with inflammation. That is the key. Do you know that 35% of the US adults suffer from chronic inflammation? 35%. That's 1 in 3 people, that their bodies are becoming so inflamed. So what inflammation does is it creates acidity. And we cannot be acidic at a neutral level. We need to be slightly alkaline at all times. So the pH chart, neutral 7.2, anything above that is alkaline, anything below that is acidity. And we need to be about 7.35 if you really want to know. And what creates heart disease from the standpoint of inflammation, that is blood-borne inflammation. When there's inflammation in the blood, then it's acidity. We can't have acidity. So what's the resource that the body has to buffer down acidity due to inflammation? Is to pull microparticles of calcium. And when it's in the blood, it's pulling magnesium and calcium out of the arterial walls. Now it's creating cracks. We can't have cracks in the arterial walls, can we? How does the body fill in those cracks? With the putty of cholesterol. Then the liver starts producing cholesterol. Now the cholesterol goes in there, starts layering itself in to fill in the cracks. Now that starts to calcify because there's this never-ending cycle that's going on. And then now you have narrowing of the arteries, and now you have heart disease. And then you have somebody that decides to go because now your heart stops or you have a heart attack, and they put a stent in because there's nothing else that the allopathic medical system can do is to put a stent in because, you're going to die. So that's an acute condition. But they haven't done anything with the fact that the faucet is turned on and you're trying to wipe up the mess before you turn the faucet off. Diabetes, very similar thing. It's inflammation. And so diabetes is part of how the pancreas is working. So how is the pancreas working, and how is it producing insulin? And how are we chewing our food, and how are we digesting our food, and how are we consuming our food, or processed foods, very inflammatory foods. And then now we create more inflammation and more problems in the body. Autoimmune disorders, it's all about inflammation. Irritable bowel syndrome, inflammation in the bowels, in the colon. Chronic pain is contraction. Contraction created from inflammation. Anytime a cell is inflamed, it contracts. Anytime tissue is inflamed, well, if all tissue is made of cells, they contract. When you have contraction, you can't get blood through the tissues. When you can't get blood through the tissues, or it's impeded, then you have pain. And it all comes back to the circle of inflammation. Sciatica, digestive issues, all of those are created from inflammation. And the sciatica is where the sciatic nerve has been bound in. It runs right beside the sacrum, and it has been trapped within the inflamed tissues. Because when connective tissues get inflamed, such as muscle, ligaments, and tendons, they get sticky and they go like this, and they bind. Now they're lacking blood, lymph, and oxygen. So they start contracting more. So not only does it contract more in the respect of the sciatic nerve, is that it ends up trapping the sciatic nerve right here. And then now the sciatic nerve is trapped. Little microparticles of calcium go in. Remember, inflammation is acidity. Little microparticles of calcium embed into that tissue, and then the sciatic nerve rubs on it. And then you get pain that's coming down the leg, and you want to really just go crazy in regards to it. The good news is that there's ways to open it up. I've got the Regen RCT machine. I can use body work and I can peel open that tissue and relieve the pressure from the nerves and start bringing back circulation to those areas. And when we bring back circulation, it starts dissipating those little microparticles of calcium. And the body is absolutely intelligent because it knows where that little microparticle of calcium came from. And it'll take it and it'll put it back to that bone exactly where it came from. And that is why when we start aging, when we have so much inflammation, then now our bones start thinning. Oh, well, you know that you are 80 and you know your bones are getting thin. Well, why are your bones getting thin? Well, they're getting thin because you have inflammation. They don't get thin just because you're old. They get thin because you have inflammation and contraction and lack of circulation. Deepak Chopra said the number one pandemic of our times is inflammation. This is where we're heading. And we can stop it if we decide to do so. Where does inflammation begin? It begins in the blood. You know, when we, many of us have digestive problems, and I had huge digestive problems because of all the antibiotic therapy I've been on in my life. And it pitted and it scarred and it scarred my colon. And there was a lot of chaos in the family and I used to get stomach aches and we used to eat really fast because, the plates went, the bowls went around. We had to gobble the food down because if you turned your back, my brother would stick his finger into my sandwich and then I would give it to him or, steal something off your plate, whatever it was. We don't have healthy eating habits. And so a lot of us hold these emotions into our digestive tract. And what happens from the blood perspective is that when the small intestine is inflamed and has bacteria overgrowth, then there's so much absorption that comes from the small intestine and we're eating such toxic foods. The processed foods that we eat is insane. The chemicals that we're subjecting ourselves to is insane. So those little cilias draw those toxic substances into the blood plasma, and then now you have systemic inflammation. And that systemic inflammation will find a place to park. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask.
What do the kidneys do in terms of the stuff that's been drawn into the blood that's not good?
Pardon me?
What, do the kidneys have a...
Then the liver and the kidneys have to filter it. So now you're taxing the liver and you're taxing the kidneys. And then you end up with kidney stones because now you have a kidney that is inflamed due to the fact that it's working overtime. And so when the kidney is inflamed, microparticles of calcium go into the kidney and start building kidney stones. And they start off very tiny and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the center is old and then the outer edges is newer. Gallstones, same thing. Is inflammation in the gallbladder. Yes. So then we're now taxing our filtration system and we don't need, and then now you have bacteria and fungus that's coming into the bloodstream too as well. And fungus, then it affects our teeth. Yellowing teeth and problems with the teeth is all to do with the fact that the pH balance is out of whack and it actually affects our teeth and it affects our breath. If you've ever seen somebody that they have really bad breath, well, it's all coming from the bacteria and the fungus that is happening from the digestive system. And that small intestine, people think that the digestion happens in the stomach. It doesn't actually happen in the stomach. It actually happens in the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. What the stomach does is that it churns the food. So the stomach produces hydrochloric acid and the pancreas produces sodium bicarbonate. And you've got to have a good balance of that because when the food goes into the first part of the small intestine, it needs to be alkaline. And if you don't have a good balance, because a lot of us don't have a pancreas that works properly because we're not food combining properly, we're not chewing our food properly, we're eating processed foods, toxic foods that are very difficult for our bodies to digest. And so you're taxing the pancreas. Well, the pancreas also produces insulin. And insulin is what the mitochondria needs to produce energy for the cell, ATP. And when the pancreas is overtaxed, then you have this problem with the levels of sodium bicarbonate and you have the levels of hydrochloric acid. So it goes into the stomach, it churns and then comes into the duodenum, and it needs to be alkaline in the duodenum. And then now it comes into the small intestine. And as the food comes into the small intestine, it draws the nutrients through the wall of the small intestine with these microvilli the cilia that draws it into the bloodstream. And then the red blood cells pick it up, the plasma picks it up. And then now you have the nutrients that are being delivered to various parts of the body. And when the cell, so this is a picture of a cell, and these little protrusions on the cell are actually the little receptors. They're called villi, microvilli, and they actually draw in the nutrients into the cell. When that cell gets inflamed, those microvilli flatten out and the outside edge of that cell contracts. Now it's not as receptive to blood, lymph, and oxygen. Now it can't get the nutrients. Inside that cell is the mitochondria. The mitochondria produces energy for the cell. So that cell could be, a nerve cell, it could be a muscle cell, it could be a brain cell, it could be whatever it is. Now, if those little microvilli are drawing in toxins into that cell, then now you have acidity in the cell, and now little microparticles of calcium have to be drawn into that cell. And now, how are you going to have a healthy body? So we've got 50 trillion cells in the body. And each cell has receivers and transmitters. So there's the energy exchange that goes on with that. And that's how, a healthy cell is a healthy life. If we don't have a healthy cell, we don't have a healthy life, period. And if that cell is contracted and inflamed due to toxicity, then you're in trouble. So here we go. We hear about genetics constantly. Oh, my parents had diabetes, and so I'm going to get diabetes, or I've got high blood pressure. My mom had high blood pressure, so I'm, predisposed to that genetically. There's very few diseases, very few issues with the body that are genetically predisposed. Really, what epi means is above genetics. And so when you think of an app on your phone, there's a user interface. So you click on the app and it opens up the app. The thing is that our user interface, when we come into our body is much more complex. We have the ability to produce cells. We have the ability to receive transmissions. We have the ability to have spiritual experiences. We have the ability to have the soul. And these ancient cherished spiritual teachings are all about that, all about the fact that the humans are very complex. We have the ability to replenish the cells. The cells die, and then now the new cells come in, and certain tissues have cells that replenish themselves faster. So muscles, ligaments, and tendons, they don't replenish themselves as quickly as like skin, the digestive tract. So epi means above genetics. So what are epigenetic triggers? Thoughts. So there's 7 of them. So when we have thoughts that are like ones of fear, if I'm fearful, what is that going to do? It's going to dump a bunch of cortisol into my system. What's that going to do to the body? It's going to create inflammation. That inflammation is going to find some place to park, whether it parks within the digestive tract, whether it parks within the shoulders, the elbows, the knee, the hip, the spine, the neck, the TMJ, wherever it decides to park, because that's going to be where you're going to have the inflammation. So what else do we have for epigenetic triggers? We have breathing. If we do shallow breathing, then we can't calm the body. We can't come into the present state of consciousness. It's an epigenetic trigger. If we live a lifestyle like I did growing up, fight, flight, fight, flight. And the other thing is that when your mother is carrying you, the 3rd trimester of her pregnancy, we are now in a delta wave, and the unborn baby feels those waves. The baby's in a hypnotic state, and it's feeding anything that is going on around it. So that is coming into the unborn child. It is proven that that unborn child is operating in a hypnotic state at the third trimester, and whatever's happening in the environment outside of that uterus is now coming in. And that child is operating in a hypnotic state in the delta brain waves from the third trimester of pregnancy all the way to age 7. Anything that goes on in that child's life is going to come in and is going to be part of these epigenetic triggers. And those epigenetic triggers are things about the breathing. I mean, the only reason I breathed deeply was because I was a swimmer. But other than that, it was like anxiety and stress. I grew up with anxiety and stress. So breath, focus. When we can maintain focus, we can then bring down the triggers. We can now bring down stress. We can bring down anxiety. Many of us are procrastinators, or they put it off for another day. Those are epigenetic triggers. We can change that model based on what it is that we decide to do in the conscious moment. Movement. When we move, we can move fast and we can race around all over the place, or we can move in methodically and we can dance with our bodies and we can move with our bodies and we can enjoy Qigong like Robert does. And we can actually do movement and we can create different triggers within our body and we can settle ourselves down. Nutrition. How we feed ourselves, what our thoughts are. I mean, I grew up in sugar, sugar, sugar. My mom baked every day. So I had like the sweetest tooth ever. Sugar is super inflammatory. One of the most important epigenetic triggers are feelings and emotions. Those emotions are so powerful. When we have fear, joy, anger, surprise, those are what's triggering ourselves. And they're going to be dumping, whether it's dumping adrenaline, which is good adrenaline into our body, or whether it's dumping cortisol into our body, or whether we're dumping histamine into our body. We can decide what we're going to do as far as how we're going to be triggered. And it was interesting because when I was in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, I was in downtown Bouchard and Robson or whatever. And I was trying to find a place to park. And it was like I was going around and around, and I was like, oh, that's a one way. I got to go this way. And then I missed that. I missed the parkade. And I was like, for like a half an hour within this like 3-block radius. And it seemed like every time I turned around, there was like more of it. Oh, and it was just like, and I could feel my anxiety. I could feel that trigger because I've worked really diligently on subduing that. And I could feel it coming up because it wanted to come up, right? Because like, it's like, and we've all done it. It's like we jump into this thing where it's like frustration and anxiousness and it was coming and it was coming. I was like, no way, man. You're not going to get me. No way. Because what is that going to do? Other than dump a bunch of adrenaline, a bunch of cortisol into my system, inflame me, give me a sore neck, get me all freaked out. And is it going to change anything? No. And when we can start recognizing those triggers and find out that, maybe it's a little flutter in the heart, or maybe it's a little crook in the neck, or maybe there's something that comes in like a headache or a twitch or whatever it happens to be, a stomach ache, then we can start calming the body. And men in particular, when it comes to emotions, we're conditioned to deny them. And women are conditioned to talk about them. And so we have this really funny environment so women just talk about their emotions with other women for the most part. And yeah, so these triggers get stuck within us. So what are the consequences? So some of the consequences can be because men often feel betrayed from their fathers, or many people feel betrayed by their doesn't necessarily mean men. There's a lot of, issues that go on with fathers. And I talk to a lot of people and it seems like, because, the bottom line is that my father was never taught. I was just talking about it today in regards to, don't think I ever heard my father say, I love you. You see, he wasn't raised that way. I mean, I knew he loved me because we had a very special bond. I never held his hand and walked down the street, never did any of that kind of stuff, but I knew he loved me. However, a lot of people, but he was only coming from what he learned from the time that he was in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy until up to his 7th year. And many men feel betrayed by their fathers. Many people feel betrayed by their fathers. So one of the consequences is that we typically have unresolved hurt, anger, and rage. And anger is a really quick one to go to. I mean, women get angry too, but I see a lot of men that are angry. And a lot of it has to do because we deny our emotions and we don't know what to do with them. So one of the most important things is to create the spirituality in the truest sense of who you are. Reconnect with spirit and divinity. Diseases of aging. So the genetic diseases are very small. So we have diabetes, dementia. What is dementia? Does anybody know what happens in dementia? The crevasses of the brain starts filling with plaque. And that plaque then prevents the brain waves from going. And so they get all messed up. And so then you've got sometimes, depending on where the plaque is sitting, right? Whether you've got short-term memory loss, long-term memory loss, whatever it happens to be. But the plaque is building within the brain. That plaque is to do with inflammation. And most of the time what happens is most people have spinal problems, issues that are coming up the neck. We're not even getting circulation to our brain. So I don't even know how we can, where we have people that have so much buildup of calcium. I mean, I've worked on elderly people that their necks are like this and they look around like this because there's so much calcification built on the C5 and C6. Disease of aging, highly influenced by diet, emotional state, sleep quality. How many people get good night's sleep? Because the system is sitting there in a triggered state. Because most of us, our vagus nerve, which is our wandering nerve, it comes up by the neck here on the side, and it connects to every single organ in our body. And when that neck is so tight and the upper trapeze is so tight because we got so much stress and anxiety and we got these knots here, the vagus nerve is trapped and it doesn't allow us to go into a parasympathetic state. And when we go to sleep, then we can't actually calm the body because the vagus nerve, for the most part, is what's creating this like anxiousness within us and we can't relax. And so then, then we take sleeping pills or, whatever it is, a gummy or smoke a joint or take whatever it is. What we need to do is we need to untrap the body. We need to open up those blockages so that the body moves freely. Those blockages that are created from inflammation. And then take control of the root cause. Understand what's under the hood. What is under our hood? What's going on? So when we talk about emotions, let's talk about faith versus fear. Now, does anybody, when you get goosebumps, what do you think comes first? The thought or the feeling? Do you think goosebumps is a feeling or a thought? It's a feeling, right? The goosebumps comes up. You don't go, oh, I think this, and then the goosebumps come up. It's a feeling. I'd like everybody to try something. I'd like you to try just to recognize how powerful we are as far as a being, as far as frequency goes. Is that if everybody closes their eyes and they think of the worst thing that has ever happened to yourself, but put a smile on your face. So close your eyes and think of an incident, but keep a smile. Okay, smile, everybody. Come on, Lisa, smile. Come on, Kathy. Diane, smile. Close your eyes, Cynthia. Smile. Close your eyes. Smile. Soundscape. Smile. And try to conjure up that image of something that has happened that has been really detrimental to you. And keep that smile. Keep the smile. Okay, keep smiling. Keep thinking of that. Come on, smile. Come on, Michael, smile. Yeah, keep the smile. And try to conjure up that image. Keep that smile. Keep going. Smile. Okay, now open your eyes. Now, did it have power over you? Could you actually feel the hurt and pain from it. Because we can change our frequency as quickly as just smiling. And for the longest time, because I don't have anything to smile about. And so I started to just do this smile thing. And at first I felt like it was really weird, right? To do this smile thing. And then now I just do the smile thing because it like makes my day. And then when you smile at somebody else and they're like, hey, how's it going? Yeah. And it goes to show how powerful we are. So when it comes to goosebumps, it's the feelings before the thought. And when we realize that the faith versus the fear, as soon as we go into fear, we paralyze ourselves. As soon as we go into fear, we contract. And when we can smile, we can change that frequency. So if something comes up and it's like, whoa, and it's like, ma, hey, whatever. What am I going to do about it? I could go, oh my God, my toe hurts or it's swollen. Oh my God, I'm going to have to get my toe chopped off. Well, you know what? Hey, looks kind of funny. Well, you know what, toe? You need some attention. Okay, let's do it. Rather than, oh my goodness. And then you're now putting all of this pain and contraction within the whole body. So every choice you make can be from faith or fear. Which one will guide you today, tomorrow, tonight, this moment, the next 10 minutes? What's going to guide you? Is it going to be fear? Because fear actually stands for false evidence appearing real. And most of the fears are something that we just create because we can, because the world is giving us so much fear. It's like, oh, what's going to happen? I've got 2 grandchildren. My daughter says sometimes, and I go, you know what? Let's just keep in the path of faith, because if we go to fear, then what is that going to do? It's going to dump a bunch of cortisol into your body, create a bunch of inflammation, create a headache, do the anxiety thing, and you run around and the kids are anxious, and my grandson doesn't sleep properly, my granddaughter's like screaming and yelling, and it's like, whoa, like, wow, let's just smile. Because that's how easily you can change the frequency. You just smile. I mean, how could you have an argument with somebody if you're smiling? Hey, yeah, be really difficult. So what happens in this model of faith versus fear? So the left brain is the masculine side. The right brain is the feminine side. Love is higher energy. Fear is lower energy. The logical side of the brain is the left side, and the emotional, intuitive side is the right side. Now, the way that we live our society, we spend 95% of our time in the left brain. Oh, I got to think about what's going on. Like, I got to figure this out. I mean, I got to oh my goodness, like, what am I going to do? We need to be in the right side, because that is our creative side. How many of us, I know for myself, I've had some kind of conundrum trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And then I go have a bath. Not that I'm having a bath to figure out what I'm going to do. I just go have a bath, and I'm like laying in the bath, completely peaceful, completely in the moment, in my right brain, not in my thinking brain. And it's like, bing, like, whoa, never even thought about that. Because now I'm in that intuitive side, and we need to move ourselves. The left brain, the masculine brain, is only there to organize the thoughts. It's not there to control your life. Because when you let that side of your brain control your life, you're in the egoic mind. The ego wants to just argue and be right. I mean, yeah, have you ever done that? It's like you get into this thing, oh yeah, this is green and this is blue, and the person's here and you're there, and your ego's kicking in because you know what, I'm going to do, I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm like this, and da-da-da. And then it's like, whoa, like who cares? Really? So let's just move into a different space and get ourselves out of that hamster wheel, because that hamster wheel will create inflammation, it'll create blockages, and it'll create a very disastrous life. And it'll create so much anxiety, so much fear that, there's a yogic saying that says that our unending desire to be right prevents us from having compassion. And that is when you're stuck in that left brain, that egoic mind. And I've had it where I've said to people, because it's like, you know what, I can feel when you're going down that path, and I'll say, you know what, I'm not going to argue with your ego, because it's never going to win. Because it doesn't matter how many facts, figures, and logic, because that ego is just going to take over. So what we want to do is we want to move more into the creative side, move more into the nurturing side. When we can nurture ourselves, then we can truly feel love for self. And that is the most important thing. Try this when you get home. Go into the bathroom and look into the mirror and look into your eyes. Look deep into your eyes. What did that feel like for you? And say, I love you. When I first started doing that practice about 8 years ago, well, first of all, I had a hard time looking in my eyes. And second of all, when I was saying, I love you, and I said it repetitively because I just wanted to feel it, the tears started rolling down my eyes because I realized that I didn't even know who this person was that was staring back at me. I was like 55 years old. And I didn't even know who she was. I had no idea. I was like, wow. Because you go and you look in the mirror, you do your hair, whatever. But I mean, look deep into your eyes and say, hey, girl, I love you. I honor you. I cherish you. I respect you. I trust you. How many people trust themselves? They got to go back into the left brain and prove that, whatever it is going to be right, whatever it is, where you can inherently say, I trust myself, and I'm going to sit in this moment, and I'm going to go into the feminine brain, and I'm going to sit within that intuitive mind, and I'm going to know that this decision is right. That I'm going to know that this path is right. Because how are you going to see what the future is going to hold? How are you going to be in the conscious moment and recognize what's going to come in when you're stuck in this wheel trying to oh, well, you know what? That sign, I don't know, but somebody's got to prove that that sign was actually a sign or was it something else? And then, I really recommend that you start moving into that. The accelerators, the inflammation pandemic. What are the accelerators? Yeah, the number one pandemic is inflammation. Signs of cellular aging, brain fog, stiff joints, chronic pain, insomnia, digestive issues, bone loss, wrinkles, high blood pressure. High blood pressure is basically you got sticky blood. You got so much plaque and toxins in the blood can't flow freely because it's sticky. When blood gets toxic, when it gets inflamed, it gets sticky. So now you're trying to get blood to move through the arteries and the veins, and it's sticky blood. So it's got pressure. So the heart has to create enough blood pressure to bring the blood out of the arteries, bring it back through the veins. And then now you have varicose veins, because when the heart pumps the blood through the arteries, and it has to create enough blood pressure back to come through the venous system, the veins has a series of check valves in it. And those check valves open and close because the heart's always working against gravity. Even when we're sleeping, you're not working with gravity. The only time you're working with gravity is if you're inverted. And then those little check valves start plugging up with debris and crap because it's coming through the small intestine wall, the toxins, the plaque, and those little check valves get plugged up because they're catching debris. And then now you have varicose veins. Now you have backing up within the walls. The walls of the veins are starting to weaken because those little check valves aren't opening and closing properly. And then now you have pain and you got to go and get your veins stripped out. And now you have issues with circulation. So these are all signs of cellular aging. The highway of life. Well, the front door and the back door. There's 33 feet between the mouth and the anus. What goes on there? All kinds of things, but I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk about is the front door, which is chewing. So when we decide that we're going to consume food, and I grew up in craziness, so it was like chomp, chomp, swallow, chomp, chomp, swallow. The stomach doesn't have a second set of teeth. And then now you've got chunks of food that's coming in. How are you going to digest properly? All these factors take place within the small intestine. Then the colon starts getting plugged up. And then you end up with issues like, well, the master of all organs is the large intestine. the center of health. And then you end up with issues like this. The large intestine. Only 1% of the population has a large intestine that looks like that. A healthy large intestine. 1%. Because, first of all, we eat a very sticky diet. We eat a very processed diet. We're not chewing our food properly. The first stage of digestion is the saliva. So you need to chew your food till it's a liquid, and then you're going to swallow it so that then now the stomach can churn it properly. And this starts all of these issues. So the colon, the large intestine, the wall of the large intestine gets stuck with plaque. And it starts gluing itself onto the wall of the large intestine. So the body, the toxic, the chum or whatever it's called, comes out of the small intestine through the ileocecal valve, which is right here. And it comes out of the small intestine into the large intestine. And this is where, right here is where the appendix is. And then it comes up the ascending colon, across the transverse colon, down the descending colon, through the sigmoid, and then out the rectum. That is between 7 and 9 feet long, the large intestine. The small intestine is around like 20 feet long. So it's 33 feet right from here, depending on how big you are, 33 feet, right from the opening all the way to the exit. That's how many feet. That's a long path. And when we're eating foods that are really inflammatory foods, dairy, flour products, sugar. Those are the 3 most inflammatory foods that you can cheese. Most people are like, oh, I love my cheese, but it's very inflammatory. So what happens in the large intestine is that plaque starts welding itself onto the inside of the intestinal wall, flattens out this bulbous structure called hostras, and then now the large intestine isn't doing something called hostra churning, which that comes out of the small intestine as a liquid in through the ileocecal valve. And then now it's got to draw the last bit of moisture out through the thin layer of the large intestine wall, take the last bit of nutrients and minerals, and then start forming the poop. And when those hostras are flattened out due to plaque, that now it's not hostral churning. So our tone is actually the tone of the colon. That's what keeps our tone. I mean, we think that a 6-pack and whatever it is going to be the best thing. But if we have a large intestine that isn't functioning properly, it is the largest muscle in the body because it's like up to 9 feet long. So if it's not hostral churning properly and doing its thing, because those hostras all flattened out due to plaque, that plaque gets welded onto the outside edges of the large intestine wall. It starts loosening the thin, tight junctions of the large intestine wall, loosens that thin layer, and it starts seeping into the bloodstream. And that is leaky gut. So leaky gut is leaky large intestine. So let's call it what it is. But your doctor would never say, you got a leaky colon, because you'd go, so that means that the poop is going into my pelvic girdle and the poop is going into my bloodstream. That's not a good picture, is it? So now you got systemic inflammation. You have systemic infection. Now you have your liver and kidneys that have to be working even more overtime in regards to all of that. So it's leaching in through the intestinal wall of the small intestine, and it's leaching through the intestinal wall of the colon. When I was doing training down in Mexico, there was this 90-year-old fellow that was very constipated. He was a World War II vet, and he was in his 90s. And he decided to go for colonic therapy because he couldn't do enemas himself to help clean up the large intestine. And so you can see what's coming out of the tube. And he recognized these seeds. And he recognized that these seeds were from World War II. They had been stuck in this plaque in the lining of his large intestine for 50 years. Because that plaque is like tar. And you go for these colonoscopies and everybody's large intestine looks good, but if you have polyps or something, but it doesn't get into the folds. All of those folds, cold, all of that. Because I spoke to a woman that does colonics and I said, what is the deal with this? because it really was a mystery. And that's what the mystery is. So that plaque gets stuck in the folds of the large intestine and it doesn't show. And I don't even know what they even do. I mean, I don't even believe them half what they do. So these are all the issues. These are prolapsing. You know, you'll even see women, I've heard it many times. They'll go like, you know, they're really slim and they go, I just can't get rid of this little bulge that's like right here under my belly. Well, that little bulge is the transverse colon that has fallen because it's full of crap. So the little bulge is a transverse colon. Doesn't matter how much weight you lose. It's full of it. And so all of these issues, my issue was the balloon sigmoid. And I'm still healing my large intestine from that because I know it was ballooned because anytime I would have any emotional issues or whatever, it would go ping, ping, ping. And I had major, major issues with my colon. And that was because of all the antibiotic therapy that I had. I had the systemic infection when I was 13, and then I had another life-threatening systemic infection when I was 31. And I took so many antibiotics between the age of 13 and 25 and 31 because of yeast infections. And I had hypoglycemia so bad that I would almost go into a coma because I wasn't absorbing anything because I had so much yeast and so many problems with my small intestine and my large intestine that I would almost go into a coma. And that was when I was 25 years old, I changed my life. I went to a naturopath because I was a mess. I was like, I just got married and it was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And my ex-husband was like, whoa, what did I just marry? Because I would be, I would be like, my blood sugar levels would drop and I'd be like this and I'd be like, give me food, like give it to me now. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, and I would be cooking something or whatever it was. And of course my go-to was something sugary because it spiked up my blood sugar levels quick, but then they just like dove. And then I was even in like a worse condition. And he was just like, whoa, what the hell is this going on? And it was all because I had all of this yeast because of all these antibiotics that I had. And I went on a yeast-free diet when I was 25 years old, went to a naturopath. She gave me yeast busters, went to this bakery in Edmonton to try to find yeast-free bread. And if you didn't pop that baby out of the toaster fast and put something on it that would keep it, it went hard as a rock, like really fast. And it's like, I lost like 14 pounds on this yeast busters diet. And then I started miscarrying. I had 3 miscarriages. And I had miscarriages because I was like leaching crap into my pelvic bowl and it was being absorbed by my uterus. Why do we get cysts in our uterus and cysts in whatever? It's because of all that toxic mess that's coming in through the intestine wall that's like messing everything up. So I went on this like major diet. I cleaned up a lot of my stuff and then I, managed to carry my daughter, who was my last attempt. And then I ended up with staph infection in my uterus. So then I was like on another antibiotic thing. And so I fought for my life for like, oh my gosh, after she was born, it was like crazy, like a long time. It was pretty crazy. And so then what did that do? It pitted and it scarred my large intestine. I mean, I have cleaned up my large intestine a lot and I've seen scar tissue come out. It's crazy. It's crazy. And this is the heart of health, the large intestine, and people don't talk about it. Does your doctor, go ahead.
Did you do colonics to clear that, or did that help you at all?
I did coffee enemas.
Okay.
A lot of them. Yeah. A lot of them for like years. Yeah. Like not like every day,
No.
but just clean it, just the process. It took me, and there's still some stuff going on. Yeah. And it was all the scar tissue.
So
Yeah.
you can fix that.
You can. Yes. And then what I do from the standpoint of the body work is that I can actually do body work and I can push that transverse colon up and get it in because it should be sitting above the belly button. And most you see some people that are really, really heavy and it's the transverse colon that has dropped so much. Yeah. Because it's full.
Heavy, right? Full.
It's heavy. And when I did some training in Mexico and I was talking to this woman who was operating room nurse in Oshawa, a community that I think there's about 200,000 people there. And she said every single day in her operating room, they were cutting out somebody's colon every day in a community of 200. And that didn't cutting it out. And she said the worst one that she ever saw was she could have put her entire body inside of that large intestine, her entire body
So stretched out.
from plaque. And so you could imagine how sick that person was. And she said that every day she wanted to put her head through a concrete wall because she just didn't want to go to work. And I talked to another woman that lived in Red Deer, and she was an operating room nurse. And she's told me the same thing in Red Deer. And that didn't even count for the people coming in through emergency. And she said through emergency, there's about one a day getting their colons cut out. Yes. Those colostomies. And then they take out a portion of it because they can't do anything about it because this is chronic. The allopathic medical world cannot do anything about this. Nothing other than cut it out.
I had a girlfriend, very slim girl, but she was addicted to chocolate bars and pop and whatever. So she got colitis.
Yep.
One of those things.
Yep.
And they cut out part of hers as well.
Yep. And it was all to do with lifestyle.
Lifestyle. Yeah.
Totally. Could have been, and it could have been corrected even when she was in that situation.
She wasn't overweight at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just bad eating habits.
That's right. I remember years ago that I ended up talking to this woman, and she was like in her late 20s, and she had like bowel movement like twice a month. And her skin was gray. And I said to her, like, yeah, oh my goodness. Yes. So all of this can be, the good news is that we can reverse this if we decide to focus. And most, and it feels so good when you're, so toxic load and tissue damage. What's going on? So when I talk about scar tissue, so this is what healthy tissue looks like, meaning like muscles and ligaments and tendons. So what happens is that all of those tissues have a striation to them. You can see these kind of bands like this. What happens when they get sticky due to inflammation, that fibrins come in, and because they're trying to wall off that inflammation, and they're trying to wall it off to protect the body because it wants to, just like cysts. Cysts are an infection. They become a fibroid because the body's walling it off. And now the world that we live in, they call a fibroid a tumor because there's much more fear. If I said that you have a tumor, or if I said you have a fibroid, which one would put you into fear more? Oh, I know it's a tumor, I got cancer. Well, they used to say it was a fibroid because it was not cancer until it determined, and then it was a tumor when it was cancer, but now they call them all tumors. So what happens is the fibrins come in. So this is what scar tissue looks like. Now, how could blood get through that? It'd be really difficult. So we have scar tissue that happens in joints. For example, what happens in knee and hip joints. So the hip gets really inflamed, and that's why there's so many hip replacements, is because you've got systemic inflammation coming in because of the large intestine. So now it's spewing into the hips. It's binding the tissue of the tissues of the connective tissues of the hips. So now how does circulation get to the cartilage? It can't, because you have all of those tissues that start looking like this, scar tissue. So now blood can't get into the cartilage. Then the doctor says that you have bone on bone. Well, the cartilage has actually shrunk because when it doesn't have circulation, it's not healthy. It's not plumped up because it's starved of blood, and it starts calcifying. And so it actually welds itself onto the inside of the hip joint, and it feels like bone on bone, but it's actually bone on calcified cartilage. And that's what I've said to many people that have had issues like that, is that I've said, well, could you ask your doctor where the cartilage went? Did it like fly out of the body, or like where did it go? It's actually cemented. So what happens is that when we open up, because I can open up those tissues, and even with people that have had hip replacements and knee replacements, I work on them a lot, because now you're creating blockages. So often what happens when you have knee and hip replacements is that it feels good for the first while, and then scar tissue kicks in, because the body doesn't like a foreign thing in it. If I have a sliver in my finger and I can't get the sliver out, then what does the body do? Creates a little inflammation, and it pushes it out. Well, when you have a hip replacement, which is foreign in the body, or a knee replacement, or whatever, mesh, surgical mesh, another thing. is that the body's going to try to push it out. It's going to wall it off because it's not supposed to be there. You can't say, hey, I decided to put this in there, so don't act like you should act. And then, yes. So then what happens is that when there is a hip replacement or a knee replacement or whatever replacement, is that I can go in and I can peel open those tissues. And that's why it feels good for the first little while, because now the scar tissue hasn't kicked in from the fact that you've got that. And I can go in there and I can use a machine or my elbow and I can peel open those tissues and get circulation so that you don't have pain from the scar tissue formation, which is what that looks like. Because pain, if you have aching pain, it tells you a story. Aching pain is blood that's trying to get through tissue, but it's not really getting through very well. And then the more exercise you do, the more pain you're in, because you're increasing the river that's flowing down there and it can't get through the tissue. Throbbing pain is where you have a wall that looks like that, and then it's just bumping right up against it, and it's like throbbing pain. And then stabbing pain is now you've got nerves stuck in it, and then it's rubbing on the calcium, and it's then flying up the arm or wherever it happens to be. So this is the scar tissue and the silent saboteur, and that's what a tumor looks like. So the body walls it off. The good news is it can be. These are what adhesions look like in the colon. So whenever you've had, so here's the small intestine and the colon and everything. These are what adhesions look like. They're fibers that start binding in. So if I've had a cesarean, I never did, but if I had a cesarean section or any kind of surgery, then what happens is that there's a wall that can come down about 2 inches of scar tissue, and then off of that scar tissue are adhesions that start to form. Adhesions also form from the spewing of infection into the pelvic girdle. So then it starts binding into the small intestine, starts wrapping itself around the colon, choking it off. And then now you don't have good circulation to the very important part of our body. And all of these wreak havoc. And adhesions when I had my appendix out, I had an adhesion that had grown up and had attached itself between my ribs, and a little cyst had grown on it, and then it had connected itself to my rib over here. And when that adhesion came open, I had a popping here. That's why I knew it was attached, because the person was working here, popped here, and 2 days later I could hardly move because I felt like I had bruised my rib. And what would have happened with that, because if that adhesion hadn't been dealt with, that adhesion would have kept contracting and kept pulling on that rib until one day I'd turn and then I would crack my rib, and they would say, well, you're now 55 years old and you're getting old and your bones are thinning and they're brittle, and so that's why you broke your rib. Well, no, I would have cracked my rib or broke my rib because there was an adhesion that had grown up from my appendix scar.
What causes adhesions?
Inflammation. Putrefaction.
What is the body trying to do by creating that?
Well, it's just binding the tissue. It's binding. It's creating. Yeah. It's just walling itself off from the infection and from the inflammation, and it's just binding because the cells are getting sticky, and so it's just creating that, and it's attaching itself, and then just growing from there, building it up. Because when you have infection that's coming into the pelvic girdle like that, or a scar tissue that is growing adhesions off of it, because it creates a life of its own. When you cut into the body, you're creating scar tissue and adhesions. And what happens is that those little fibrins come in to wall off any infection, any inflammation, and they start creating adhesions, and then they attach themselves to the intestine, and then now see, the small intestine is supposed to be slippery and moving all like this, but then those adhesions and prevent that. So now you don't have a good flow within the intestinal tract, and they'll actually wrap themselves around the colon. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And then they'll be hard, you'll feel it and it'll be hard, and that's adhesions. Yeah.
Good. Does any of this connect to what leads to a hernia?
Hernia?
Yeah. I know there's so many different kinds of hernias, so you may not.
Is it inguinal or hiatal?
Well, for me, it was inguinal.
Inguinal, yeah. So what happens with an inguinal hernia is that there's spewing of infection that's coming through the large intestine wall, and it is deteriorating the strength of the fascia, because fascia lines the intestine, the entire stomach cavity, and so it weakens it. And so because of the infection and the inflammation, and then the small intestine pushes through it. Yeah, it's all coming from the large intestine and the small intestine, the spewing of the infection. Yeah. And then what they want to do then is they want to put in mesh. They used to suture hernias, just a couple of stitches, and now they put mesh in. And mesh is a nightmare. Mesh is a nightmare. Because what happens with mesh is that now it's a foreign thing. And so the body, it's so much inflammation goes to that, calcium goes to that, and it creates a concrete wall in the abdominal cavity because the calcium starts building up on it. And now it's a wall. And I can go in and I can break it open and keep breaking it open, but you can't take it out. And the other thing is that with mesh, like prolapsing and things like that, where, it seems like it's more women that have prolapsing issues and stuff where the, uterus or the bladder or whatever happens is that, when you think of, if you were to hang a hammock between two rotten trees, your fascia is already deteriorated because of the fact that you have this, these connective tissues that are deteriorating due to inflammation and infection that's spewing in. And then you go and you put surgical mesh and you're attaching it to what? You're attaching it to, what are you attaching it to? Those tissues aren't very healthy tissues. So then it's going to pull that out, and then you're going to be going in there and doing more surgery and just a mess. And then all of that calcium is going to build up on that mesh. So if anybody goes and gets a hernia, you try to find a doctor that does sutures, and not many of them do, because it's all about but it's all to do with what's happening with the large intestine and the infection that's happening. And then hiatal hernias is that the ileocecal valve of the large intestine is getting stuck open because it is getting scarred. And so you've got the backup of poop that's coming into the small intestine. And then now you have methane and hydrogen gases that are coming up through the small intestine into the stomach, and you're pushing the stomach sphincter up into the diaphragm. That's a hiatal hernia. And many people have that. And I work on those a lot because it's basically scar tissue. And so I can actually go in with my elbow, and it's a painful situation, but I can actually go in and I can push it down into the stomach.
The leaky gut, what does that refer to? Everything you're talking about?
Yeah.
Something specific.
It's coming through the colon wall and the small intestine, the large and small intestine, because the large intestine wall is very thin. And so the tight junctions of the thin wall of the large intestine, because of the plaque that's stuck in there, basically poop. And so it deteriorates, it putrefies, because if you think of a compost pile, what happens with the compost pile? There's gases, there's putrefaction, there's parasites, and the parasites love the plaque. They bury themselves in that plaque. That's why they're very difficult to get rid of, because they bury themselves in the plaque. So a lot of these things that we take, it doesn't get into that plaque, because that plaque is like tar. And so you've got to get it out of there. And so what happens is that it loosens the tight junctions of the large intestine wall. It also draws through the small intestine wall, and then that's leaky gut. It's leaky large and small intestine. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay, so here's what a frozen shoulder looks like. So this is all scar tissue here. And I have dealt with many frozen shoulders. I was just working with a woman up in Courtney that she stopped playing baseball. She's 35 years old. She stopped playing baseball when she was 17 because her shoulder was like a mess. And I said, I can help you. I did 4 treatments on her, and she's like 80% out of pain, and she's throwing the ball, and she's happier than heck because the fact that I got rid of that scar tissue, and it binds. One of the biggest issues with the shoulder. And when people get like numbness in their hands and they wake up in the morning, their hands asleep, it's 90% of it's coming from the shoulder. Or if you get nerve pain, the renal and the ulnar nerve gets trapped in the shoulder because it's got, I mean, the nerves all have to come out of the spine. And when you look at all the nerves of the hand and the arms and everything, it is unbelievable how many nerves are coming down that hand. And they get trapped in the shoulder from this. Yeah. And I opened this all up. And I mean, then they go do this and they start cutting into it. And then now you have scar tissue. And now, you know, from cutting into the body. I mean, you know, when I had my spinal injury, I corkscrewed my sacrum. And I thought to myself, holy crap, if anybody would have decided to go in there and decide to like, because somebody said, well, did they do surgery? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I couldn't even imagine what that would have been like as far as the scar tissue. That's why I know about scar tissue, because I lived it. And this is what my spine was looking like, but I didn't have fusion. So when I was 40 years old, my life was a complete drama. It was like, I was in a crazy relationship and I lost my job. And then a week later, I lost my relationship, and a week later, I lost my job. And then 2 weeks later on Valentine's Day, I got into a car accident and corkscrewed my sacrum. And so I twisted I twisted at the third and fourth lumbar, the third lumbar. And so I had my spine, I mean, I had so many issues. It was Chinese medicine that got me walking properly. But I mean, I had so many needles put in my back. I knew all about scar tissue because I didn't discover this doctor of Chinese medicine until a year and a half after I was injured. And I was a mess. And when he started treating me, he was already dealing with scar tissue, and he had to try to get the needles through the scar tissue so that I wouldn't go into spasm and then jump off of this table. And like 6 months in, I mean, he was treating me 3 times a week. He put more needles in my spine, more needles in my sacrum, and the tip of my tailbone, the back of my knees, into my toes, all the way up my spine. 6 months in, it was like, oh, I was getting needle shy. And I was like, oh, I can't do this, man. But he was the only one that gave me hope. And I knew that there was nothing, I mean, oh my God, I was looking at a wheelchair before I met him, and I thought, oh, the bumps in a wheel. And I knew if I got in, I'd never get out. And then the bumps from the sacrum, it would have just sent me through the ceiling. And so scar tissue. So what happens in the spine, I mean, this is what they want to do when the spine, you see all these little holes here? That's all loss of bone. Loss of bone due to inflammation. So this person could have had an injury. However, what happens is the spine doesn't hold itself up on its own. It's got ligaments and muscles that run all the way up the spine. That's why chiropractic is not an effective treatment for the most part. It'll be effective and give you relief, and then you'll turn something and then you'll get back. And because they haven't dealt with all the muscles that are pulling the spine out. I have corrected scoliosis on people. I had a fellow that was in his mid-70s, and his spine was over between his shoulder blades like an inch. And he had, since he was 17, and I got it back because I dealt with all the muscles that were pulling it. And so what happens is that you get all this inflammation. There's so much acidity that the calcium's being pulled out of the vertebra, and it's pitting it, so it's making it weak. And pulling it out to buffer down the acidity due to the inflammation. And with me, I mean, after my Chinese doctor got me walking properly, he hadn't dealt with all the issues to do with the scar tissue. And so that came much later. But the much later was when I had so much calcification on my neck, I couldn't even like do this. And when the calcification got broken up, I was laying on my side and I had lightning bolts of energy coming down my arm. I was like, I could have lit up this whole campsite. It was like, because it was such an entrapment. And so the spine itself, when there's so much inflammation and all these muscles that hold the spine up get inflamed, and they go like this, and then they start binding to the spine because little microparticles of calcium are, inflammation, so they get stuck on the spine. And that's when you end up with this situation here. And then they want to fuse the spine because it's weak now, because it's lost so much bone. All you need to do is go in there, peel open all those tissues, get circulation. I increased my height by 1.25 inches. I had what they would call fused discs on third, fourth, and fifth lumbar. They were flat. You couldn't feel the space between those discs because my spine was bound to it, because that's where I got injured. That's where the corkscrew happened when I got into my car accident. So all of that tissue had bound, and it stuck itself to 3, 4, 5 and upwards. Like, it was quite a mess, my spine. And so there was so much calcium being pulled from the bone to buffer down the acidity that it had flattened out my vertebra. There was no more bumps. So it looked fused. But there was still a little spaces. It's just that it was all shrunk, and the cartilage had contracted and everything. We got that all open, and I gained like 1.25 inches of height, because now all the synovial fluid of the spine gets plumped up, because now it has circulation. And then now you can feel the bumps in 3, 4, and 5. Because when that microparticle of calcium gets dislodged from that scar tissue, it knows exactly where it came from. Back it goes, building bone spurs, same thing. Bunions, same thing. It's all calcium. The body's depositing microparticles of calcium because of inflammation. And when it starts building, it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. And so bone spurs are all to do with inflammation. And then they want to do this. Yeah.
So Sharon, what do you think about like the doctors always prescribe cortisone shots for inflammation?
I got one in my SI joint. I was so desperate before I met my doctor of Chinese medicine. And I was so desperate. I mean, I was just absolutely crazy. I was like 40. By that time, I was like 41. And I was like hooped. I was in so much pain. Felt like a dog was gnawing on my tailbone. So I did that. And he shot it in there, and I couldn't get off the sofa for a week. I couldn't even stand up. Because what it actually does, some people it works and it gives them some relief, but it's actually changing the molecular structure of the tissue within it, and it's creating a hardening within that tissue. So it may give you some, me, it didn't do anything. I mean,
some people have like anaphylactic shock from it too.
That's right. I mean, it's a chemical. It's a petroleum product. It's being dumped into your system, for sure.
It's bad news.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a catabolic steroid that they put into your body. But catabolic means that it eats muscle. It actually destroys surrounding muscle tissue, but it has huge anti-inflammatory properties. But at what cost, right? Like you can, like all these athletes get it in their shoulders, and then all their ligaments and connective tissue starts to fall apart from too many cortisone shots, right?
And then they what? Then they're going to start, try to patch you back together because your arm's going to fall off?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it is awful. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, you don't know the long-term effects of any of that stuff, right?
And it's poison to the body, right? And I realize that there's times where, when and I'm not against the allopathic medicine. I mean, when, I had my systemic infection with my appendix, okay, they kept, it ruptured. But the bottom line is that I ate corn on the cob that night, and the corn on the cob got stuck because that ileocecal valve, now I know. All I needed to do was have an enema. And I wouldn't have had my appendix rupture, whatever it was. Like, it just backed everything up, and all I needed to do was flush myself out. So they kept me alive, and, whatever went on because of that. Or, if I broke a bone and I go in and they set my, wrist or whatever it is, and okay, great. But that's acute. They can't do anything for chronic, and they won't admit it. And then they do things like the steroids, right? Or
Some people get the shot and they never get the pain back too. So it's weird. Like, some people work well. Everybody's biochemistry is different.
That's right. Exactly.
So you can't make one thing for everybody.
No, that's right. And then now they're doing shoulder replacement surgery. They do knee, hip, now shoulder. What are they going to do next? Head. So basically, this is energy of the body, which is where healing truly begins. When we can start shifting ourselves to a more love frequency for self, when we can start getting connected to ourselves, when we can start moving out of fear and realizing that the body is meant to heal. And when we talk to these doctors and whatever that we are, I mean, in Latin, doctor is supposed to be, it means to teach. Well, I don't know of any allopathic doctor, unless they've gone down a different pathway, that actually teaches you anything. They just go in there, they decide what it is at the chain of events, and you ask them a question. Some of them get angry because they don't want you questioning them. And so this is where we really need to shift ourselves, because light is life. And this is how the energy wave, because everything is energy. We are energy. It proved it with the smiling thing, is that when we can change our energy, we could change our life. And that's what's like, it's imperative. So the mind controls the body, but you must control your mind. And the mind in the intuitive sense. And when we really, and it's not easy. I've been through a lot of stuff. I've been through a lot of childhood trauma and a lot of things that happened to me. However, we can move past that and then get into the frequency of love, but the frequency of love for self, and move out of fear. And faith and fear can't operate in the same equation. It's impossible. You can't have faith and fear in the same moment. It doesn't work that way. And faith in the fact that we were given, I mean, we have such an amazing vessel here, such an amazing car, that it can do anything based on whatever it is that we've been subjected to, emotionally, physically, spiritually. We can hang on to those traumas. We can hang on to them, and we can, like, own it, because we have every right to be angry because that person really did a rotten thing to me, and I'm going to hold on to that till the day I die. Wow. How's it working for you? Because I don't think the person really cares.
No.
And they might even be dead.
Yeah.
And then you're still angry with them. It's like, okay, how's that working for you? Because your life is miserable. You've got so much inflammation in it. You're now sick because you got autoimmune disease, Parkinson's, whatever it happens to be. And so then you can't change the frequency because you can't love yourself, because the fact is that you're going to hold on to that trauma, that anger, that hurt, that pain until it kills you. Wow, good one.
So they call that dis-ease causes disease.
That's right. Dis-ease in the body. So we want that frequency, because what is quantum? Quantum is electrons. Every cell attracts electrons. We are biophotonic. We have the ability, we need electrons. They're like little fireflies to our cells. And if we decide to burn out the fireflies and dampen them and whatever it is, then how are we going to have a healthy cell? Because you got to have a healthy cell to have a healthy body. If you don't have a healthy cell, you can't skip. You can't be like, okay, I'm not going to be concerned about the cell. I'm just going to jump right into something else. No, I hate to break it to you, but those little microvilli, they need to have a good frequency in order to be able to. So if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Nikola Tesla. It is so important. You could walk into a room and you could say, wow, the energy in that room wasn't very good. Well, look in the mirror and see where your energy is. Look in the mirror and see if you can actually go in to a place of love for self. Because that's where the game is won. The game is won when you can decide you're going to make a step to love yourself. The game is won when you're not blaming each other for everything and you're a victim and you do this, you do this, you do this, that's where the game is won. And I'm all about winning the game. So here we go. This is where life begins. This is one of my most favorite slides ever. That is the sperm and that is the ovum. And this is captured using biophotonic photography. It's called Kirlian photography. And that is the zinc spark, also known as the nexus spark. So when the sperm meets the ovum at the point of conception, they've captured the spark. And the healthier the sperm is, and the healthier the ovum is, the brighter the spark. And that is the start of every one of our lives. Every single one of us started with that spark of light. That proves that we are frequency being. We are electromagnetic frequency beings. So if we want to change the frequency, then we change our lives. Because I want to remember that I came from that. Because when I leave, this is what happens. From first spark to final glow, they've actually captured, using the Kirlian photography, biophotonic light, the energy body leaving the vessel, leaving the body upon death. So that, because energy can't be destroyed, it can only be transformed. And if we want to live the spark of life, the final glow, so if we want to glow every aspect of our life, take the challenges and move them into something that is positive for yourself. I have a girlfriend that I just spoke to. She had to go back to England, hadn't lived in the UK for like 17 years or whatever. She was there for like 2 days. She's running out of money. She's like looking at being homeless, hanging out with all the homeless people because she wanted to meet some of them because she figured she was going to be there. It's kind of funny in a way, but not really. And so anyways, she falls and she breaks her hip. And so I'm like, oh, whoa, Christine, like this is not too good, right? And then she goes, yeah, but and so we were talking and I said, hey, so she's in the system now because now she can't be on the street because she's got a broken hip. And so now she's getting her habitual residency way faster because she probably would have waited 2 years if she wouldn't have broke her hip. And I'm like, yeah, I'm glad you broke your hip. So, we could take challenges whatever way we want to take them. So she could have been all depressed and say, hey, Christina, I said, you know what? This is really going good for you because you've got this caseworker. And she goes, yeah. And I said, hey, hallelujah for the broken hip because she would have been on the friggin' street, and so we could take these challenges because the challenges are only part of our journey. The challenges are only saying to ourselves, what is it that you're going to do next? And this is like, what do we want to do between the zinc spark and the final act? Do we want to live a happy, fun life, or do we want to suffer and be full of pain? Your next powerful steps. What do you want to do? These guys are fun. So, love yourself. Cleanse your colon. Hydration, fiber, and real food. Reduce inflammatory lifestyle. Sugar, processed foods, stress, dairy, flour products, move daily, movement, I go dancing as my therapy every week. I do dancing as much as I possibly can. Release stuck emotions, journal, breathe, feel. Most people, we become so disconnected from our bodies because we don't like our bodies that we don't even feel. We can't even feel our emotions. And many of us have lived in a world that, nobody ever talked about feelings in my household. It was like no way, man. When I started counseling back in like the year 2000, I remember my counselor saying, so how do you feel? And I'd be like, good. And he'd be like, that's not a feeling. And I'm like, good. And he gave me a list. I was like happy, sad, angry, mad, and he gave me a list of all these feeling words. And I was like, holy shit. There's like 50 on this page. I was like, joy, I'd heard them, but they certainly weren't in my vocabulary. So meditate, release your spirit, let it fly, become more conscious, listen to your body because the body is telling you a story and it's whether we're listening to it. Many times we ignore it, that ache or that thing. And we just like, and then you just like push through it. And then you become disconnected from it because you don't want to feel it. And I know what that's like because I lived that I didn't walk properly for 5 years with my spinal injury. Yeah. So you can scan these barcodes if you like. There's also up here, there's another one here for a discovery session. It's free, totally complimentary. If you want to book one with me, we could talk about next steps and coaching or whatever it is. Totally up to you. So when I was 11, I made this plaque. And the plaque was, I was in grade 6. I'll never forget making it. And it had a saying on it. As a river flows into a lake, let your love flow into other people. And I thought, wow, that was deep. And that's really, if we love ourselves, then we can attract the love frequency, and we can go into that because the heart has the highest frequency. So the highest frequency we tap into. That's why when we had all of these things with the 6-foot rule and everything, a lot of it had to do with the fact that keep you away from the heart frequency, so I can't feel your heart, and isolate you so you can't feel that heart energy. We could tap into that. So let the love flow within yourself and let it flow into other people. And in closing, this is little Sharon at the age of 5. And this little Sharon, I look into her eyes, and she had a lot of fear in those eyes. She had a lot of anguish, a lot of heartache. And however, what I would recommend that you do if you decide to do some mirror work, get a picture of yourself when you were a little girl or a little boy, and you put it up there, and you say to that little girl, little boy, and you imagine her standing in front of you, yourself, or find him standing in front of you, and you would say, would I say these things to that little girl of mine? Would I say these things to this little boy of mine? Would I be like, you bad boy, I'm not going to love you because, I'm just going to sit here and suffer, or would you take that little girl and you would give her a big hug because she fell down and cried? Would you give her a hug and say, you know what? Take my hand and let's move on this journey? Would you say to her, if she had been traumatized in her life or physically abused or mentally abused, would you say to her, oh, just suck it up and, move on, or just be angry for the rest of your life, little girl, and suffer and have pain? Or would you honor her? Would you cherish her? So I recommend that you put a picture of your little girl or your little boy up. And then when you go into the mirror and you look into your eyes, you remember that the eyes never change. And that little girl and that little boy deserves to shine. That little girl and that little boy deserves to be free and to live a life that is so beautiful and so full of life that you just want to hug them and hug yourself, because that is who we are. We are little girls and little boys. We just need to let ourselves be. Yeah. So here we go. This is it. So what I suggest that you do is that this moment forward, whatever it is that you do, is that take time and decide what your destiny is going to be. Take time and decide how you're going to change things, how you're going to move that clock back. Bring back your vitality. Bring back your energy. Bring back that spark so that when that energy body leaves at the end of the day, that it is going so strong that who's ever with you in that room is going to be like, whoa, holy shit, have a good trip, man. See you on the other side. That's what we have the choice to do. That's the destiny that we can create. Whatever we decide to do, take it, hold on to it, and find that little girl and that little boy and love them and look in the mirror and make changes today, whatever it happens to be, so that you can then move it forward. And I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being here and for listening to me. And this is my passion. And I love it because all I want to do is change the world. All I want to do is tell you what it is that you can do so that you can live a life of vitality. And thank you from the bottom of my heart.